As Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine rages on in its fifth year, Vladimir Putin is hosting his annual St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. This is meant to bring together a global array of CEOs and economy ministers and potential investors to the Russian economy. And while the European Union and the UK are bypassing the event due to the war, Washington has sent a delegation. It's not led by a trade representative, but rather President Trump's chairman of the Commission on Fine Arts. The Ukraine war, for the moment, is in the background.
There is a certain amount of flash, opulence, bling in historic St. Petersburg this week. The Economic Forum is meant to pull off the moniker the Russian Davos, hoping to at least try to rival that yearly gathering in Switzerland. St. Petersburg usually draws tens of thousands of delegates. Not many from Western countries, since Vladimir Putin sent troops into Ukraine in 2002. But guests from other regions have filled the gaps, allowing Putin to promote a, quote, multipolar world. Right-wing media personality Candace Owens is part of a small group of Americans in the mix. She says her podcast often questions U.S. support for Ukraine. She was mobbed by Russian media after her session.
On my podcast, and Americans are really getting tired of funding, not knowing where money is going, learning that oligarchs are buying yachts. So we think about it at a practical level in terms of our taxes and where our money is going.
Ukraine itself managed to cast a shadow over the forum on Wednesday with drone attacks on the host city, which is also Vladimir Putin's heavily protected hometown. Ukraine said the drones targeted an oil refinery and naval base vital to the Russian invasion, part of the effort to make Russia's war even more expensive than it has become, while reminding forum delegates what's happening some 1,500 kilometers away.
And for more now, let's bring in Craig Kennedy. He is a non-resident senior fellow at the Kyiv School of Economics and a former vice chairman at Bank of America. Good to see you, Craig. What is standing out to you most from this meeting?
So we're seeing, of course, a large gathering in St. Petersburg, as we've seen for many, many years. But there's a big difference today compared to even just a few years ago. And that's clearly the absence of large Western companies and banks who used to be the mainstay of this gathering. It's a much more disparate group of companies, largely from the not from the West. And this has real economic implications for Russia as well, the fact that they're not getting a turnout from the West.
And there's said, in fact, to be a debate underway at the forum among business and political leaders there in Russia about what the future might hold for Russia after 4 years of full-scale war against Ukraine. If you put this into the bigger picture for us, where has the war left Russia's economy?
So we're really starting to see a toll being taken on the economy, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for Russia to hide. The economy is not set up to fund, or at least the budget is not set up to fund such an expensive war as this. And what the budget has attempted to do is to offload some of the funding for this war onto the Russian corporate sector. They've compelled the banks to lend a huge amount of money to the arms production industry, which is not in a position to repay it. And they've also put pressure on the oil and gas sector as well to cut their budgets, to borrow more money so that they can pay more taxes. Now, that worked for a while, but they've gotten to the point now where they've overextended the credit capacity, and that's really starting to take its toll. We're seeing rising levels of bankruptcy. We're seeing very high interest rates, and it's clear that this is having a downward effect on the economy as a whole, and even raising the risk of financial sector destabilization.
Against that backdrop, Putin's deputy chief of staff told the conference that it was pointless to expect the old days to return or for the West to lift sanctions. How do you think that that is going down with Russians?
I think for Russians who understood what the source of Russian prosperity has been, this is going to be a really difficult message to receive. I used to go to this forum on a regular basis when I worked in banking, but before that, I actually was teaching history many, many years ago at Harvard University. And one of the things that I taught my students was how heavily dependent Russian prosperity has been really since the 19th century on Europe. Three things in particular that Russia has relied on. First of all, has been investment capital. If you take a company like Gazprom, for example, most of its investment capital, most of its debt actually comes from the West, not from Russia itself. And likewise, markets, if you look again at Gazprom, most of its revenues came from selling to Europe. And the loss of Europe has been a huge blow to the company's finances. And then finally, there's technology. If you look at Gazprom once more, it was hoping to be able to diversify its gas sales globally. But to do that, it needs to have LNG technology. And where did that technology come from? The West, in particular from Europe. And with those technology bans in place now, companies like Gazprom have no access to low-cost capital, no good markets the way they used to, and they've got no access to the sorts of advanced technologies that they need to grow their businesses.
And yet there is said to be a camp of nationalists in Russia who see the war in Ukraine as really the first stage of a much deeper global confrontation with the West, that they would even be looking to expand the conflict. How do you see those prospects?
Well, I think there certainly are people who long for the imperial glory of Russia in the past, but that comes at a cost, and you need to be able to afford those empires. We saw that the Soviet Union suffered from imperial overreach. It could not afford to maintain this very expensive empire, and it collapsed. And now we're seeing an effort at empire rebuilding, which is proving to be just too expensive for Russia to be able to manage. We see the results in the battlefield, it's faltering, and we see the results in the economy. The economy itself is weakening by the month.
It's been reported that Putin will not meet with the U.S. representative who is attending the forum. What do you make of that?
Well, it's difficult to understand the complex relationship going on right now between the United States and Russia. All I can say is that I think Russia was hoping for much more out of the negotiations that were being conducted under Washington's auspices than it actually has received. And that's been a real blow to it. It has few options left at this point other than to continue to fight the war and hope that for some sort of lucky breakthrough, or to come to its senses and decide that it's not going to be able to spend its way to victory. And the longer it continues to fight a war which is damaging the economy, the greater the risk of some real problems emerging at home, especially around the financial sector.
Craig Kennedy, non-resident senior fellow at the Kyiv School of Economics. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise.